all for coming. So, I remember a poster that was in the classroom of my second grade teacher. It read, "Life is a journey, not a destination." I've kept this advice really close to me for the past 18 years, and I've always tried to enjoy and learn from every experience in my life. Today I'm going to share with you a little bit about my own journey, but I'd also like to share with you how I've realized that this journey is far less meaningful unless we keep the destination in mind. Education has been important to me for my whole life. It must be, or I wouldn't be 26 years old and still a full-time student, right? Although some of the most important life lessons that I've learned have come outside the classroom. I was fortunate to grow up with very few real-life challenges, so most of the challenges that I had to overcome and the life lessons that I learned early on came from sport. For me, I fell in love with gymnastics at a really young age, and I would go on to compete on my gymnastics team in high school. It was during my junior year gymnastics season that I first experienced a big setback and a challenge that I had to overcome. And I would learn a lot from that experience. It was just a few weeks into our season, and it was at a home meet. I was about halfway through my balance beam routine. My hands completely slipped on a back handspring, and my foot came around and crashed into the beam hard. I tried to take a step to perform the next element, but this was met with excruciating pain. I would soon find out that my foot was broken and my season was over. Like many young athletes, much of my identity thus far had been tied to competing and training in gymnastics. And so when this happened, I was absolutely devastated. While it seems like a small setback in the grand scheme of things, in my 17-year-old mind, this was the end of the world, right? But I went back and I thought about a story that one of our team captains had read to us on the bus during my freshman year. It was about the power of a positive attitude. I realized that although I was upset, I had the power to respond to this situation however I wanted to. I could continue to be upset and angry about the situation, or I could work on making this season the most enjoyable and successful for my teammates as possible. So I chose the latter, and I ended up learning so much more from this experience than I ever could have had I remained healthy that season. I came back the following season to accomplish something I had never thought was possible. At the end of my senior year, I was standing on top of the podium in the Michigan High School state finals for the all-around. For me, this was the first experience of realizing that hard work and dedication could take you places you never thought possible. I realized that sometimes you can overcome setbacks and come out stronger in the end. It was also during my junior year of high school that I first started to entertain the idea of a career in medicine. I took a biology course, and I was absolutely fascinated by the way that the human body worked, all the way down to the molecular level. I also really loved the humanities. I loved learning about the human experience, reflecting upon it, trying to make sense of it. I would go on to graduate from high school and enter college at the University of Michigan. There I studied biomedical engineering, but it wasn't long before that unique relationship between a physician and a patient drew me towards a career in medicine. Around the same time that I started applying to medical school, I came across CrossFit. At first I was doing it just to get in shape in college, to find something to fill that void that I was missing when I had quit gymnastics. But I found myself a year later in 5th place at the CrossFit Games in 2010. Only a few months after that, I found myself at my CrossFit Level 1 seminar. And it was here that I first started to learn about all of the theory and the methodology behind CrossFit and what we're doing every day. I was absolutely fascinated with Greg Glassman's definitions of fitness and of health. And I was mesmerized particularly by this sickness, wellness, fitness continuum. With this continuum, we illustrate the fact that wellness is something that is considered normal by most of our doctors. Something like a blood pressure of 120/80. Something that when we walk into our doctor's office, they think that we're doing well. But there's also a blood pressure associated with being sick. And when that happens, our doctors give us treatment to get us back up into the well range. On the other hand, there's a blood pressure associated with being fit, something like 110/60 that we see in world-class athletes. You can place any marker of health along this continuum. Cholesterol, HbA1c, even our mile times or our max deadlifts. We realize in CrossFit that by exercising properly, giving ourselves the right nutrition, sleep, and relieving stress, we can push ourselves as far on that right side or that fit side of the continuum as possible. It's inevitable that life is going to give us some challenges and knock us down. But if we're over on the fit side of the continuum, we have this buffer. We have to go through well before we can get sick. So fitness provides a hedge for us against sickness. It was after hearing this and hearing about the theory behind CrossFit that I realized this was so much more than just an exercise program to get me into shape. It was so much more than even a sport. CrossFit was going to be the gateway to optimal health. I would go on to graduate from college and enter medical school. I moved to Cleveland. This was a stressful transition in my life. Life threw me a couple of other unexpected challenges at that time. And just a few weeks after moving, I competed again in the 2011 CrossFit Games. Looking back, when I went into the games that year, my expectations for myself were simply that I didn't want to do worse than the year before. Even though going into the final event, I was well positioned for a podium finish in 3rd place, when all was said and done, I fulfilled my own expectations I had set for myself, and once again, I ended in 5th place. While I was so happy to still be among the fittest women in the world, I was disappointed in myself because it was my own lack of self-confidence that had held me back that year. When I came back and I started my first year of medical school, I had a really hard time processing everything that had happened, adjusting to the new life of medical school, and beginning to train for the 2012 games. All the time, for no reason. I would cry on my way to the gym. I would cry in the middle of workout. Sometimes I would even cry walking to the parking lot at school if nobody was around. Eventually, I realized that my emotions were trying to tell me something. I started talking to my counselor at school, and I realized I had never stopped to think about why I wanted to compete in the games in the first place. I had just done it, qualified the first year, and it seemed like the logical thing to keep going. But I realized that I needed to decide for myself why this was important to me if I was going to continue to pursue the CrossFit Games while I was in medical school. I knew that I had certain gifts, and I wanted to use those to inspire other people. I also wanted to prove to people that it was possible to compete in the games and be in medical school at the same time. I wanted to show that even if you're busy, fitness should still be a priority. I didn't want to give up at this point. So I started to work through these things. I also realized that it was important for me to set a specific goal for myself after what had happened in 2011. So I decided I wanted to be standing on the podium after the end of the 2012 CrossFit Games. Once I had decided what goal it was that I was trying to reach and why I wanted to reach it, training became much more fun again. I was crying less and less, and I was improving my fitness more and more. It was also during this first year of medical school that I began to have my first glimpse into how healthcare was delivered. I